Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do our first tier list ranking of UFC fighters. So let me walk you through a little bit of my thought process for this list and the intent of these rankings. So what I did was I did some research and I scrubbed data on the 25 greatest fighters of all time in the UFC based on accomplishments, technical skills, and also how the community in the UFC views these fighters. Then I took that and I cross-referenced that information with their social media following and their popularity. And then I had a second list kind of built on that. And then combining the two, taking thus these 20 fighters, limited to this data set, and rank those fighters based on what I feel is some version of collectability. I don't want to use the word investability necessarily, but when you're looking to buy UFC cards in such a niche market, a lot of the demand for these fighters is based on their social media impact. And while I think UFC is still at the beginning of this journey towards becoming an even more mainstream sport, it's important to remember when you're buying these cards, to figure out for yourself why you're buying them. Are you just purely putting in your personal collection because you love the joy of collecting it and the chase of the cards? Are you looking to buy UFC fighters that you think will appreciate in value? Some individuals just like to get the best of any individual card because that's how their collection is wired, or some version in between. And, something to remember too is that just because a card is rare doesn't mean it's in demand. If you look for certain cards that, they're certainly rare and there's not many out there, if there's only one or two people even interested in buying them, the chances of that card increasing in value in the short term, medium term, or long term is probably pretty much impossible unless some drastic change happens for that fighter. So that being said, let's get started on this list. So again, this is a 6-tier model for these 20 fighters, and based on a combination of kind of what I said, their status in the UFC community as GOAT fighters, greatest of all time, the best of the best, some of their sentiment amongst collectors, but then also their social media following and the impact they may have moving forward. So we're going to start from number 20 and work our way up to number 1. So let's get started. So what I would rank as a pure PC would be Demetrius Johnson. He would go here. One of the technical greatest fighters of all time, but the flyweight division, has pretty limited collectability. And just in general, while he is an amazing fighter and has, the record and the skills to back it up, just in the world of collecting for UFC, he's just not there yet. So I'd put him in pure personal collection, the pure PC tier. Next, it's kind of an oddball pick, but something that I kind of learned and researched and was very interested in, is Kazushi Sakuraba. We'll go in the pure PC as well. So he's a Pride legend. Doesn't really have much UFC branded cards or demand. But again, if we're starting from the history of this sport and working our way forward, which we'll eventually do on this channel, I think it's important to start with the legends of the sport. If you're going to take the equivalent, say in baseball, it's important to start with, the Lou Gehrig's, Joe DiMaggio's, and the people that built the foundation of the sport, and then we can build up to modern day as well. So that's what this tier list is kind of about, working in a little bit of the history with the modern and go from there. So Sakuraba goes in the pure PC. And then next is Andrei Arlovsky. Has amazing longevity in the sport, super accomplished. But again, his momentum in the collectability world in UFC is very limited. downside. These are three of some of the greatest fighters in UFC of all time, but their collectible base is just not there. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't hardcore collectors for these fighters, because there are, but trying to look at it from the point of view of broader appeal and potential to, possibly go up down the road, I think it's a little bit limited. So now we move on to the next tier, which will be Merab, which will be in the weight tier, kind of the weight and C tier. So bantamweight stud, amazing fighter. Some of his early autographs in the UFC are certainly undervalued. I think he's a strong play. A lot of collectors love Merab, and for a good reason. Personally, I would pick up his stuff if it was super cheap, but I think there's better ways to go. So the next one is an interesting pick, is Ilya, who would also go in the weight category. So his rise in the UFC has been unbelievable. It's a total rocket ship. Collectors love him. I mean, I've been to a couple card shows where they've had UFC dealers, and Ilya cards are totally on fire. From his autographs to his inserts to his one-of-ones. The Ilya spots, like if you look at some of the UFC breaker channels on Whatnot, the Ilya spots fetch top dollar because he's in super, super high demand. But with that demand, I'm always concerned about hype and what his career is going to look like. So again, this is another weight for me. But his card values, some of them fetch amazing amounts. I know some of his one-of-ones have gone for above $5,000. So take that with it, what you want to do. But I would wait and just try to look for value if that's where you're going to go. Next tier, which I'll put in the research tier, is Frankie Edgar. So Frankie Edgar has a wide array of cards, but his demand is minimal. But I think there's possibly value with Frankie Edgar. Why did I put him above Ilya? Just because of the consistency and, the thought if Ilya were to just randomly get knocked out, with all this hype, his card values will probably plummet in the short term. And that kind of concerns me a little bit. So going back to Frankie Edgar, I put him in the research tier. Next, BJ Penn, pioneer of the sport, absolute legend. Prices for his stuff is stable, but not a lot of sales, doesn't move very often. But there are people that collect BJ Penn, and I think as time goes by, his stock will go up and the value of his cards will increase, but we just need more people in the sport that will learn about the history of the sport and start doing some research. And I think it's like that in every other sport. It's just that those sports have evolved quicker and they're further ahead, so their history is more appreciated. In the UFC, true hardcore UFC fans appreciate the history, but we need more mainstream collectors to come in and learn about that as well. Also in this tier, we are going to put Dominic Cruz. So this is an appeal to the purest of pure UFC fighters. Super light volume on sales for him, but his buyers that are into his cards are super loyal, and that's what keeps the prices propped up for him. So again, this is a research play, make your own decisions. And I'm not necessarily picking specific cards or ears of what to go for here. But again, just kind of do your research and look into these fighters. Next one is Henry Cejudo. So his appeal covers both the UFC and the Olympics. His demand, again, is a little bit niche, just like the whole UFC sport. Has some cards that are rare, mostly not. Not a super in-demand fighter. But again, I do see some potential in there if you research and you look for the right type of cards, maybe some low number autographs, things of that nature. There's some value there. And the last one we're going to put in this tier is Daniel Cormier, which is a little bit interesting of a pick. So let me talk you through my thought process on this. So multiple time division champion, huge nostalgia, obviously one of the UFC commentators. So he's in your face a lot and his name is out in the news. One of the concerns I have with him though is that there are a lot of autographs of his out on the market. So you need to focus on the autographs that are specific and unique. So older on-card autographs would be what I would focus on for Daniel Cormier specifically. I think there's some definite value there, but you have to go back and they have to be on-card. Anything else I would avoid. So we go to the next tier of fighters, which is buy the deals, buy bargains. So that would be Amanda Nunes. So she is the only female on this entire list. I mean, she is universally recognized as the GOAT female fighter. There are a lot of cards of hers that are short printed, especially the older ones. So focus on serial number 25 or less, autograph on card. If you can throw a relic in there, great. But huge potential here, in my opinion, especially if you can buy the deals and you focus on that. Next is Stipe. Has a huge legacy as a heavyweight. A lot of his cards early in his career had super limited print runs because obviously the UFC wasn't that popular, so they didn't print as many cards. If you could focus on scarcity, but also in demand and balance that out and look for good deals, I think there's a lot of potential there, and everyone loves heavyweights. So I would look there as well. Next one is Max Holloway. Huge fan favorite, exciting fighter, high volume striker, which definitely attracts, the non-purist UFC, gets the mainstream UFC fans' attention just because of his fighting style. A lot of for the UFC, for Max Holloway collectors that I've seen, is the people that PC, that means build a personal collection of Max Holloway, they try to go for everything, including serial numbered refractors, and they try to build what's called the rainbow, which if you don't know what that means, is building the 1 of 1, the out of 5, the out of 10, the out of 25, all the different colors, all the different serial number runs of the cards. And for Max Holloway, and my research shows that the people that collect him focus on that. So I think there'd be some potential in there with refractor, low to mid numbers with autographs if you can. But his cards do sell for decent money. His breaks spots go for good money. So it might be a little more competitive as we move up this tier list. But I think you could find potential value there as well. Next, I'm going to put Usman. Dominant welterweight run. Has a lot of pretty decent value cards on the market. And because of how active he is in the community and his social media following as well is pretty decent, as well as Max Holloway's is the previous one. His cards are liquid and high demand, and I think you could find value there as well. And lastly, in the buy deals list, I'm going to put Jose Aldo. He's a Brazilian UFC fighter. His fans and collector base in that realm is especially strong. His early days Topps autograph cards are what I try to focus on, which I believe is about 2010 to 2013. I think those are undervalued, so maybe you try to find deals in that area for Jose Aldo. A lot of potential there as well. Then we go on to the upper two tiers. So the first is the buy smart is Anderson Silva. Historically exciting fighter, has mainstream name appeal. His legacy is cherished by UFC fans, and he's just generally just a legend in the sport, and people enjoy collecting his items. Again, focus on his early Topps cards, specifically his refractors. That seems to be what Anderson Silva collectors are really trying to accumulate and go for. And that'd be more of the buy smart. Are you going to find deals? Maybe, maybe not. But do your research. There's enough research tools out there, whether you're using Card Ladder or 130 Point to look up the prices of cards, or look on eBay to see what's out there. But Anderson Silva is a solid pick. And next we go to St. Pierre. And in the world of UFC, he is the icon of professionalism and what represents the best about the sport. And he's, in some lists, he is generally considered the greatest of all time. Obviously, that's going to be up for debate. But if you were to have him at the top of your list as the greatest UFC fighter of all time, I don't think anybody would argue with you. What I would focus on is trying to purchase the Topps Round 1 in the main event parallels and any early autographs. Huge potential there, low population counts. He's in demand. He has social media status and presence. So I think you focus on that. Next in this tier, I will put Jon Jones. Again, another fighter that's widely accepted as the greatest of all time. No argument here. Also, his early Topps cards and his early Topps autographs are Grail cards. So I was at a show recently, and his early, I believe it's the 2010 red ink on card autograph, the dealer was asking $75,000, which is absolutely insane price. But with such a limited amount of cards on the market and none up for sale, you could basically ask whatever you want. So is anyone going to pay $75,000 for a Jon Jones red ink autograph? I highly, highly doubt it. But who knows where the world goes down the road with UFC collectibles. I think if you look at some of the early Jon Jones autographs, and he does sign a lot, and focus on the inscriptions. You know, he does John Bones Jones, John Goat Jones, with the goat being the inscription and the bones being the inscription, and there might be some other ones I'm not aware of. But focus on rarity, do your research. But if you can get smart purchases for Jon Jones, I think there's a lot of upside there. Then going into the tier 1, which is the invest status, Khabib goes in there. You know, the mystique of him being undefeated and his global appeal across Europe, the Middle East, Asia, and the United States is amazingly unbelievable. He's been trending on Twitter lately. He partnered up with some social media influencer, and some of those videos are getting millions and millions of views with Khabib, you know, training his other fighters as he's currently retired and doesn't fight anymore. But that keeps his name in the news. That keeps interest going high. And as time goes by, the mystique of him will grow. I mean, not to compare Khabib to Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, but that plays a huge part in the collectability, is the mystery and the mystique behind the legacy and what caused the legacy to grow so much. So I think there's definitely potential there. And looking for, you can still find reasonably cheap signed cards of his as well. I would just try to focus on the sets and the subsets within those sets that are in demand and kind of do your research on that. And lastly, number 1 at the top of the list is Conor McGregor. For all logical purposes, he is the entire anchor for the UFC market from a collectability point of view. His crossover appeal is second to none. His social media status is the best of the best in the UFC. And most of the top sold cards in UFC are Conor McGregor. Trying to figure out where to go with him and what to focus on. There certainly are a lot of modern day cards you can get across Topps Midnight, UFC Finest, etc. with Conor signatures. Depending on what your budget is and how serious you are, I would focus on the 2013 Topps Bloodline autographs. And then another good pick, in my opinion, is the 2021 Prism Gold autographs. I mean, those are iconic Grail level cards. I doubt you'll be able to get a deal on those, but you certainly can make a smart purchase when they do come up and maybe go after those. So again, that kind of covers the list. Just in summary, I'm sure I'll do many more of these type of lists depending on what the goal of the video is. This video is the first stab at doing this, which is a combination of the greatest of all time UFC fighters, cross-reference with their social media outreach according to Instagram, Facebook, and using Google Trends as well, but also trying to work in the collectability aspect on their cards. So this is the list. If you got some value out of this video and maybe you learned a little something today, please give a like down below, give a comment, and a subscribe would be appreciated. It really helps out the algorithm. That being said, thank you so much for today's video and have a wonderful day.